Spur Volcano is a glacier-clad stratovolcano located approximately 130 kilometers west of Anchorage, Alaska, on the west side of Cook Inlet. The volcano is located near the northeastern end of the Aleutian Volcanic Arc and is the closest historically active volcano to Alaska's south-central population centers of Anchorage and the Kenai Peninsula. During the past 10,000 years, Spur has been the most active volcano in Cook Inlet. All historic eruptions have occurred from Crater Peak, a satellite vent located 3.5 kilometers to the south on the flank of Spur, visible here in the middle left. This video shows part of the August 18, 1992 eruption of the Crater Peak vent. Our first views of the ongoing eruption were recorded from about 100 kilometers east of the volcano when we first ascended above the weather clouds, the tops of which are at about 2,400 meters altitude. The source of the ash cloud is obscured from this vantage point since Mount Spur and Crater Peak are behind the eruption column. The plume is shown rising well above the clouds and is narrower at the bottom than at the top, with an anvil-shaped upper section expanding in all directions. The eastern leading edge of this cloud is approximately 5 kilometers behind the plain, or 25 kilometers from Anchorage. The southern extent of the ash plume is difficult to identify, and the source of the plume is not clear until we move far enough to the north to bring the summit of Mount Spur into view. Once Mount Spur is visible, the source of the eruption can be confirmed as Crater Peak. As we maneuver closer to the volcano, a sharply defined vertical eruption column can be seen rising through the clouds above the Crater Peak vent. The summit of Mount Spur is approximately 3,375 meters high above sea level, and Crater Peak, at about 2,300 meters altitude, is below the weather clouds. At this point, we are about 15 kilometers away from the volcano heading to the west. We will pass the eruption column on the north side. The area immediately east or downwind of the eruption is completely obscured by falling ash. As we come closer to the eruption column, the dark, roiling, rapidly expanding ash clouds come into view. The cauliflower-shaped ash clouds vigorously rise to form a mushroom or anvil-shaped top, reported by airline pilots to be at about 18 kilometers altitude.
It's affirmative on the eruption. It's really building rapidly in height as well as we were from our range, so about 45 miles out, I'd say 60,000 miles.
The summit of Mount Spur passes to the left of the plain as we maneuver for a close-up view of the crater area. This close-up of the base of the eruption column is taken from about 4 to 5 kilometers away and shows numerous violent ash-laden bursts from the vent. Visible on the right side of the eruption column are several light brownish colored clouds rising above the south and southeast flanks of Crater Peak. These clouds are evidence of pyroclastic flows which have advanced onto the glaciers on the south flank of Crater Peak.
Yeah. Yeah.
Coming down.
Down the south flank. We do not see any sign of flooding yet. Over.
Views of the near vent area show several shock waves transmitted through the weather clouds. These shock waves were induced by choked flow conditions in the vent and appear as bands of light emanating from the base of the column. The bands of light are actually condensation fronts generated as the shock waves pass through the steam clouds. Mount Spur is now visible in the distance to the north. The Crater Peak vent is about 150 meters below the weather clouds. The roiling dark ash clouds rise out of the vent, rapidly expand, and climb skyward into the vertical eruption column. We are now under the weather clouds, and a glimpse of the pyroclastic flows briefly comes into view out the plane's front window between the pilot and the passenger seated in the co-pilot's chair. For the next few minutes, we are above the clouds on the west side of Spur Volcano over Chakachamna Lake, providing a view of the full vertical extent of the eruption column. The lighter brown clouds to the south or right of the eruption column are fine ash winnowed from the pyroclastic flows. White steam clouds produced by melting of snow and ice around the crater rim are also visible near the base of the eruption column. The summit of Mount Spur can be seen to the north or left of the eruption column. Our view is now from the north as we closely pass Mount Spur. The southern edge of the anvil-shaped top of the eruption column is visible in the upper right. Our view is now from the south, and Mount Spur is again visible in the distance to the left. To the far right, a light brown ash cloud is visible rising from the pyroclastic flow on the east flank. We are once again west of Crater Peak, providing another full view of the eruption column and the ash cloud rising from the pyroclastic flows. We have been filming the eruption for about an hour and have completed several semicircular traverses of the area. Many of our observations have been relayed to colleagues at the Alaska Volcano Observatory in Anchorage by radio. This eruption has been assigned a Volcano Explosivity Index of 3, which compares to an index of 4 for the 1953 eruption of Crater Peak and a 5 for the May 18, 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens. Note the shock waves emanating from the left base of the column as bands of light. Mount Spur is now visible in the foreground as we move eastward. Heavy ashfall is occurring immediately downwind to the east of the eruption column. The eastern leading edge of the expanding ash cloud is briefly visible. As we turn to the west, we can see the summit of Mount Spur passing between the plain and the eruption column off the left wing. The August 18th eruption lasted 3.5 hours. Ash began falling in Anchorage at 8 p.m. A thin layer of sand-sized ash as much as 3 millimeters thick covered the city, disrupting air traffic and closing Anchorage's international airport for 20 hours. The ash plume was carried southeasterly across the Chugach Mountains, Prince William Sound, and along the outer coastline of southeast Alaska. Light dustings of ash were reported as far away as 1,000 kilometers downwind. The eruption vented an estimated 52 million cubic meters of ash. Note the shock waves emanating from the base of the eruption column. Coming into view is the southern edge of the anvil-shaped top of the expanding ash cloud. Our view is now from the south as the plane begins another turn back towards the north. The prominent white clouds at the base of the eruption column result from melting of snow and ice near the crater. The light brown clouds from the pyroclastic flows are visible again on the right, and Mount Spur is on the left. Even though we are only 2 kilometers from the eruption column, we can hear nothing but the sound of the plane's engine. We are now traveling eastward, leaving the eruption behind to return to Anchorage. Our final view of the ongoing eruption is off the tail of the plane. The eruption continues for another 2 hours. Heavy ash fallout is occurring immediately to the east or downwind of the volcano, and the advancing cloud is low over Cook Inlet, producing an artificial sunset.